Does your church have a vision of reaching the world with the gospel? Well, today we're talking about how you can really make a difference in that on the Church Revitalization Podcast.
Hello, and welcome to the Church Revitalization Podcast, brought to you by the Malphurs Group team, where each week we tackle important, actionable topics to help churches thrive. And now, here's your hosts, Scott Ball and AJ Matthew.
Welcome to the Church Revitalization Podcast. My name is Scott Ball. I'm joined by my friend and co-host, AJ Matthew. AJ, today's a different kind of podcast. We mostly care about talking about you all, listeners, and your churches, and giving you resources and information and practical, actionable topics to help your church thrive, as we promise in the introduction. Today we're going to do that as well, but in kind of a different way. And it's by doing something that's maybe a little bit hard for you and I to do, AJ, which is to talk about ourselves. I don't mean me talking about my vulnerabilities. If you've listened to this,
that's a common occurrence.
That's a common occurrence on this podcast. It's like therapy with Scott. But talking about the Malphurs Group as an organization and what it is that we do, and we want to talk about how this impacts you and your church.
Yeah, we became a nonprofit organization in 2019, and the podcast has been around for a couple of years now, and we've never really dedicated an episode to really trying to make that super clear. And the reason we're doing it today is because we just really feel like we've reached a moment in time that God is directing us to move forth in a big way, in a significant way. And that is happening in our international ministry. So the Malphurs Group has existed for a long time as a mostly U.S. serviced ministry. And that's what you know us by, and that's what we do every week, is try to help your church become better. But we do that around the world now, and that largely began. The vision for that is years old, like literally a written vision for that is years and years old. But the actual fruit of that and the kind of the launch of that happened over COVID. And so we just feel like this is finally the right time for us to make that abundantly clear and we want to talk about what we're doing, what we're accomplishing around the world, what the opportunity is, and how you can help us accomplish that. And by doing so, I think what Scott was trying to say, by helping us accomplish that vision, we're helping you accomplish your vision, because we expect a lot of you listening. As I said in the very beginning, your church has a vision for that, and probably a written vision even about, making disciples locally and globally. You probably express that in some way.
What's different about supporting our international ministry versus maybe missionaries you support or other organizations is how much further your dollar is going. It's really expensive to send missionaries and that sort of thing. We'll talk more, again, we'll get more specific and granular here in a little bit, but your really precious missions budget dollars can go really far in investing in what we're doing, and that's why we want to explain it. Also, now felt like a good time to do this because we just have crossed we've crossed over the 100,000 download mark on this podcast. Its podcast started very small, and it's grown to thousands of you download this podcast every month. And so it felt appropriate to say, hey, we have this vision for resourcing global pastors to grow healthier disciples and healthier leaders. And odds are there's a lot of you out of the thousands that listen to this. Odds are there are a lot of you that share that vision, and it seemed almost selfish to not share with you what it is that we're doing and how you can help make a difference. Let's start, AJ. Let's start by just reestablishing what the need is. What are the stakes here? Why is global church health so important to us? So do you want to maybe kind of outline some of that?
Yeah. We've got just a quick little list of some stats for you. That, again, depending on what your level of engagement has been in global missions, you'll be familiar with some of these. So considering on the continent of Europe. We're kind of breaking these down by continent because we actually have podcast listeners on all of these continents, and we actively get engagement from them, and we get requests for services from them. So in Europe, 98% of the 810 million residents do not have a relationship with Jesus. So let me say that again in another way. 2% of Europe are believers. Okay, 2%.
Did this just floor you? I mean, I know that their church membership figures are obviously much higher than that, but because in Europe so many people, like, there's still state churches, and so sometimes people are like members for tax benefits and things like that.
Right.
So this is a little bit of a difficult number to get to, but as best as we can discern, in terms of people who are actively engaged in a born again relationship with Jesus, that number is 2%. That's flooring to me.
Yeah, Europe has. I mean, this is known. I mean, Europe has simply become just a postmodern secular society. I mean, consider the history in Europe of Christianity, from what such a great position it has fallen, and especially thinking, because we're mostly speaking to United States church leaders about this today. They're really just a couple decades, 2-3 decades ahead of us as far as the decline, maybe slightly more, but we're not far behind them. I mean, we're on the same trend line, but so it's really alarming. But
I feel like I should be fair and say, is it possible there's like Catholics and things that have genuine relationships with Jesus that are sure, but in terms of what we can say in terms of engagement in the evangelical church, where we can, as best as we can, estimate sort of a born again relationship with Jesus, that number is just 2%, which is crazy low. And in our interactions with pastors in Europe, that number jives with what they're saying.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right, let's keep going. Central and South America, 550 million people not actively following Jesus. So a little bit more, kind of a different statistic there. But So
again, we're measuring this primarily in their connection and relationship to a Bible believing church. That's the only metric we can use to try and somewhat make this I'm just trying to get the people like, where are you getting these numbers from, or how are you judging that? We can't judge someone's heart. This is the best we can come up with.
Yep. In Asia, more non-Christians in Asia than anywhere in the world. And the church in Asia, relatively speaking, is thriving. Underground churches are thriving, but are obviously, one of the greatest oppressed places for Christianity as well. Mm-hmm. So huge opportunity in Asia.
And not only that, and this is true with the next one we're going to talk about as well, but there's a lot of really bad theology and practices that are also breeding in the Asian church, just due to a lack of information and resources and training, which is a real problem. It's, you think very much like the book of Acts and the whole New Testament. It's like, why is Paul writing all these letters? It's to, while the church is booming and growing, there's also a lot of really bad teaching that's also surfacing as a result as the church is growing. And so the need for training is huge in Asia.
Yeah, for sure. And then moving over to Africa, one of my favorite places that we're investing in, from the aspect of the concentration of church leaders there with such strong desire to improve and to grow the kingdom. Africa has extremely limited access to theological training, even access to Bibles in a lot of places. Certainly a lack of access to establishing healthy church practices and systems, and greater discipleship. So Africa is the place. This is what I love about Africa, and I speak with pastors and church leaders from there weekly. they have such a strong desire to learn. They have such a strong and pure heart for the church and for reaching people with the gospel. And they just are asking, what can you do?
Some of these pastors will walk days if they know there's a training they can go to. They'll walk.
Absolutely. They will travel many days.
Some of you guys won't even download a podcast. I'm just saying.
Yeah. So yeah, Africa is a super exciting place. I mean, it's a blessing for us to participate with people that have such a strong interest in like making something happen. I mean, that's why I love pouring resources into them, time, resources, financial resources, the things we produce. There's pastors all over the world that are humbly coming and saying, can you help us? What can you do to help us? And that help comes in a variety of ways, and they're asking for different things. We'll kind of get into that when we talk about what we're doing here in a minute. But I mean, they want to see their church thrive. They want to see their church thrive. They want to see the global church thrive. They have global vision, which is really interesting. In the smallest of aspects, they might have the smallest churches or even have the smallest opportunity for reach, and they've got the biggest vision for where it can go. And that's what drives us. That's, and again, we're only a few years old into really seeing this vision happen for us, and it's thrilling. So let's talk again, Scott. We brought up a minute ago about the cost of the United States equipping and sending a missionary and continuing to support him or her versus us investing in someone that's already there, an indigenous pastor. And when we say that, simply somebody from the culture, I mean, native to that country, wherever that may be. Let's talk for a second about the cost of equipping those folks versus sending somebody.
Yeah. So this stat comes straight from the International Mission Board, which is a Southern Baptist organization. It roughly, on average, costs $60,000 a year to support one missionary. One missionary every year. So that is an annual cost, $60,000 every year to go and send a missionary to Zambia, to Mongolia, to wherever, Colombia, you name the place. And so that's obviously very expensive. And so a lot of you are Baptists who listen to this podcast. You give a certain amount of money to the cooperative program, and you do your what is it? Is it Lottie Moon annual offering, Lottie Moon offering that goes towards international missionaries, and that's great. And we're not saying that shouldn't happen. All that is still really important. Missionaries have a critical role to play.
Absolutely.
The challenge is, and you know this if you work with missionaries, it takes a long time for a missionary to learn the language. It takes a long time for a missionary to establish a relationship and a culture. It takes a missionary a long time to gain some traction. And so you're talking years of investment before they're going to start seeing a lot of fruit. Whereas if you've got an indigenous pastor, a pastor from Colombia who has a church in Colombia already, but he's just not doing a great job because there's a resource gap. There are things he doesn't know how to do. He's underutilized, doesn't know how to develop leaders, doesn't know how to effectuate a strategy, doesn't know how to build these things out. If we can increase the ability of an already established indigenous pastor in Colombia, that pastor can be much more effective faster than a missionary can be. And again, it doesn't need to be either or. It can be both and. Mm-hmm. What we're asking you, it has to be both and. And so for us, on average, it costs about $2,200 to train up an indigenous pastor, and that's a one-time cost. So once we get him trained up, he's immediately more effective, and that's one time versus the $60,000 that it costs to support one missionary every single year. It's an annual cost, and so there's as we mentioned, that dollar just goes further than in supporting missionary. And again, I want to be really clear: we're not asking you not to support missionaries, but if you're looking for other ways to make your dollars go further, your missions dollars. This is a great way. Training up indigenous pastors is a great way to helping them become more effective. So how do we do that? If we're saying, hey, we're training up indigenous pastors.
Yes.
Let's get specific about how we do that.
How do we do that? So several ways that's being played out. Number one is this right here. I mean, you're hearing us on a podcast or watching us on a video on YouTube. The podcast now, so I just pulled the stats from last month, April 2023. This is May 2023 that you're hearing this, at least for the first time. In April, the podcast was downloaded in 55 countries around the world. Wow. So there
That's
are
awesome.
people from all over the world are hearing, the things that we're talking about to try to build up churches. So if you find any value in what we're saying and you're in the United States, well, there's other people around the world that are also hearing that. And then that's mostly what's driving them to reach out to us.
Right.
So
yeah. And I just want to mention that. You might go, well, hold on a minute. The podcast doesn't cost like $2,200 to produce or something. Yeah. No, it doesn't. But it's the broadest reach. It's one of the broadest reach things that we do that, as you mentioned, is often the entry point for people to be exposed to this. And maybe you're somewhere outside the United States, you're going, oh, the Malphurs Group does more to help churches around the world. We're glad you're listening, because the answer is yes, we do more than just this podcast.
Yeah. The podcast has very, very little expense to it, but it's just one of the things. So the other thing is online training. So video-based training that Scott and I have created and produced. And this is available to pastors, to churches outside of the United States at a special website, healthychurchesglobal.com. So you can go, even if you're in the United States, you can go click on that website. And there's a registration form there. It's 100% free, but you'll notice, you United Statesers, your country is not in the drop-down list. So this is not available to churches in the United States. This is exclusive content for churches outside the United States. So let me make sure one thing is clear here. We provide services for churches in the United States at a low cost, because we're a nonprofit organization. We provide the same services to churches outside the United States at no cost. A portion of the service fees that we receive from churches in the U.S. go into being able to provide free services internationally. That works out to about 15%. So if you've ever
15% of what it costs
of what it costs of our full budget. So if you've ever worked with the Malphurs Group, a portion of the service fee that you paid into went into being able to provide services at no cost to churches around the world. And so this is one of the pieces that we provide for churches outside of the United States, is at healthychurchesglobal.com. If you're listening to this from outside the US, go over to that website. You can register for free, and you'll immediately have access to training content that talks about the things that we primarily do at the Malphurs Group. And that is a strategic planning components of developing a biblical mission, a Great Commission mission, of having actionable core values, of having a process for discipling people to greater maturity, of having a vision for the future of how you're going to bring the gospel to beyond your church, and strategies to accomplish that, and build healthy leaders that become disciple makers as well and lead others effectively. So that's some first level training content. The next thing that we do, all these are sort of somewhat progressive, I guess. Group training. We do larger group training. This comes in the form of conference speaking, of conducting workshops, as sometimes connected to conferences, where we can get a slightly smaller group of people into a room and actually workshop through some things, some tangible things. And that might be a handful of people, or it might be 20, 30 people. And then teaching sort of workshop style, but not always, with connected to seminaries. So there's lots of seminary students around the world that we're able to do, outside of a classroom situation, where we can regather them for some additional training and teaching. So that's how we conduct group training around the world. And I'm telling you right now, We have some of that already planned in Ethiopia at the end of this year and in Turkey at the end of this year. We have requests from organizations in the country of Burundi, in East Africa, in India, in Nepal, and in additional ones in Europe as well. So there is present needs sitting out there unfunded to this point.
There's no replacement for hands-on work. Like, it's not enough. You can't just watch a video and go, oh, I get it. You're like, hold on, I need someone to walk me through this. And so we have two environments where we can do this. One is through group training, where we can get a bunch of pastors together. That's obviously way more cost effective, but there's a loss in value. I can't do as much with you in a group setting as I can do one-on-one. So we can do group training, which you've now talked about, and then we also do one-on-one work with churches as well. So I don't know if you want to talk about that.
Yeah. So I'll pick up right there. So just like here in the United States, one of the Malphurs Group certified guides goes to a church and works with them, helps them do all of these pieces that I just mentioned. We do that internationally as well. So we've been able to do that with several churches in Europe already. And we've got requests for services churches that would be literally ready to go as soon as we said we can come. In Germany and in Sweden and in Slovakia. We've got churches in India. We have just a new contact from a couple weeks ago in Mexico that is 100% ready to go and just waiting for us to be able to get there. And in numerous African countries. So churches are saying, when can you come and help us?
Please come help.
And yes. And so to date, that has mostly been me or Scott being able to do that. So let's talk about cost for a second. That's expensive. For one of us to get on an airplane, go to the country and stay there for a week and work with a church. We've been doing that and we will continue to do that. But I'm segueing into what really the big solution is to that. And it'll always be a both and. But the next piece is, and what we were talking about more at the top, training indigenous, what we call guides, people that are trained to do
consultants.
What we do. Yeah. Consultant. Yeah. Or we don't care what you call it. But training people in those countries to do the work themselves. So we've already begun doing this. We now have a certified guide in the country of Sweden, and we have a certified guide in the country of Switzerland. And so we've begun to see the vision move in Europe. Not that Scott and I don't have to go to Europe again, but we're trying to equip these people to be able to do that work. We have here, Scott, here's the countries that we've got people that are asking if they can become trained to help churches in their country: Colombia, Ghana, Ethiopia, Burundi, Uganda, Zambia. And I'm not even sure if I've got all of the list there, but this gives you a little flavor. And I just mentioned countries on 3 different continents. Those folks are saying, we know exactly what you do. We want to be able to do it. When can you train us to do it so that we can start doing it? and we're just having to say, soon. We can help you soon. Just a few weeks ago, we did a strategic planning session of our own, because we actually live what we teach you to do. And we refreshed some of our things. And one of the things that we pull up our values, and we just talk about our values. And we affirmed really all of our values, but we added one, Scott. And I think it's really interesting. And as we talked about it, we're like, how come we haven't had this before? But tell us a little bit about what we discovered as an actual value of the Malphurs Group.
There's probably a better word, like one word for it, and we couldn't come up with one word for it. So we're doing like we teach you. We're like, all right, we're processing through this, and we're gonna work on our core values credo. But working title for this core value is, we say yes. We say yes. When someone comes to us from Colombia or Slovakia or Ethiopia, and they say, we need help. Will you come? Will you help us? Our answer is yes. And that's not just limited to countries around the world. A few months ago, I was contacted by a very small church in California, and by God's providence, I was already I had another church that was sort of footing the bill for me to be out in California to do some consulting work with them. And so when this church contacted us and they were like, "We have no money, we've got nothing, but we need help. Will you help us?" And the answer was yes. Yes, I'll go. And so I I'd added an extra day to my trip. So I had an extra night in a hotel or an extra day of a car rental or whatever. But we just do that. We just go. And so a core value for us is when people say they need help, we say yes. The reality, though, AJ, is that because we've been getting so many requests, we've had to say yes, but we're not sure when. We don't know when we can help you.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's where you come in. If you're listening to this, this is how you can help.
Yeah. You can help us say when. You can help us say yes, next month, or yes, but it's 2 months, but we have a date for you. It won't be open-ended anymore. And we have we have the physical capacity to increase greatly. We are only limited by the funding that we have. And so we need you to partner with us as a financial donor to increase what we can do, and how quickly we can do it. And so, that's the primary ask for today. But there's a couple of aspects to that, and depending on who's listening, Scott, because you might be a pastor in a small church, you might be a staff person in a large church, you might not even be affiliated with a church, you're just a member of a church, or maybe you're an elder or a board member, and you're listening to this. So you have different perspectives, and you have different abilities in what you can do, different levels of being a decision maker or not. We're not letting any of you off the hook, because there's a place for all of you. So we certainly need individual donors. Your $25 a month gift makes a difference. We would see that. I would get that email notification that just happened, and I would be excited.
It would be great rejoicing. Yeah.
Yeah. But church partners, churches obviously collectively have a much greater capacity for a larger impact. And we mentioned this earlier, if your church I hope your church has a missions budget. If you've been listening to the podcast, you really know you should have a missions budget. And as a part of that, we would love to become a missions partner with your church. So if you're in a position in which you could affect that decision, we would ask you to prayerfully consider that, or bring it to the attention of whoever committee or personnel are involved with that. Even if you're just a member of the church and you're like, gosh, I really like what TMG is doing, introduce us to your pastor or your outreach pastor,
missions committee chair, whatever.
Yeah, whoever that might be. And so small donors make a difference. Large donors obviously make a difference as well. Churches that have a capacity for a larger gift, a larger partnership with us, we also want to continue to gift back, and we can do that through the form of our providing our services. We have something to give, and so churches at a certain level that choose to partner with us, then we want to be able to contribute back to you, and that could be annual visits with you to help you refresh your strategies and vision, to make sure that your church continues to thrive, and that you can equip us with financial resources and others, hopefully those missionaries that you've already been supporting. So those are the two primary ways that you can help us do more, that we wanted to bring to your attention today.
Yeah. So in this week's article at malphursgroup.com/189, there you can click a link to connect with AJ and learn more about what it looks like to become a donor, either at the individual level or for your church to become a donor. But some of you were listening to this, and this was when we were kind of planning out what we're going to talk about today. I said to AJ, there are people who are listening to this podcast who were sitting in the chair that I was when I was on staff in a church, I was a second chair leader. I was the associate pastor. I was on the executive leadership team. I was the number 2 guy. But I didn't have a direct link like a lead pastor often does to that missions budget. And sitting here listening to this episode of the podcast, I'd be going, man, guys, I like what you're doing, but I have no ability to influence any of that. I could mention it, but the number of hoops I'd have to jump through wouldn't be worth my time or yours, because the likelihood of something happening would be very limited. Maybe that you might think that's true and that's not actually true. And so certainly we'd love to talk to you about how maybe we could get into that missions budget. But if you're like I probably would have been and go, there's just no chance of me doing any of that, but I'd still like to help. We want to give you one other way. One other way is you can become a customer of our services. In fact, so that happens through the form of working with us in consulting, but that's also hard to get through. We are adding a new resource at the end of the summer, beginning of the fall. We're targeting August, September. And it's tentatively called right now the Healthy Churches Toolkit. Healthy Churches Toolkit. This is an online resource that's going to be available to all of those international folks for free, but will be available to churches here in the United States at a reasonable cost, either annually or you could pay monthly. And I want to show you guys something. I hope you're watching on YouTube, by the way, because I'm going to give you a bit of a visual here. I'm holding in my hands right now. How many books, AJ? A lot.
It's, I mean, yeah, it's most of Aubrey's library of what he's authored. Yeah. Which is all total. I think he wrote about 26 books. That's not all 26 right there, but it's a lot of them. Yeah.
It's a lot of them. Yeah. And if you've ever gotten your hands on an Aubrey Malphurs book, you'll know that sometimes as much as 25% or a third of the pages in that book are actually assessments and appendices in the back. And so one of the things that we're doing is we are in the process of digitizing all of these. We have the rights from the publisher, if you're watching publisher, to be able to do this. We are taking all of those appendices and so it's like tools, templates, audits, all kinds of things, dozens and dozens and dozens of them. And we are turning them into downloadable PDFs. And we're going to put that on this Healthy Churches Toolkit so that when you go, I need a template for this. I need an audit for this. I need an evaluation for this. You can go on there and you can download those. We're also going to, there's actually all kinds of fun stuff that we're doing in this toolkit. The training videos that you mentioned, AJ, for strategic envisioning and for leadership pipeline design, those will be on there, as well as some additional training like building a better board. So some board training, and we'll be adding new trainings to that as well. We're going to launch a new downloadable resource every single month. And we're going to do a live workshop around that resource each month. And you'll be able to go back and look at the archive of all those as they begin to come out month after month after month. And so, and then there'll be some other features as well that are going to be embedded in that resource. And it's going to be very affordable. So if you're like, I like the Malphurs Group, I have no way to effectuate a donorship either on your own finances or through your missions budget, but you want to support what it is that we're doing, become a customer. It is not ready for prime time yet. We are building this site right now. It will take us till August to launch it, but in today's show notes at malphursgroup.com/189, you can see sort of a brief, I don't even want to call it a beta view, like maybe an alpha view. I'm going to have a video so you can kind of see a little bit of what the website will look like when it's done. And you can sign up on there as an interest form. And that'll be a way for us to go, oh, here's revenue that we can count on. And 100% of that revenue is going towards supporting our ability to do the international work. It is. It's covering all of the overhead to make all that stuff happen. So that is a great way to support the ministry, is to become a customer of that service. And as a thank you for signing up for that interest form, again, you're not paying anything right now, but you'll get a special discount, like an early access discount, as a thank you for showing your support. So that was a lot to throw out there, AJ, but I just wanted to be cognizant of the people who go, I can't donate, I don't have the money myself. And also, I don't have access to the church's mission budget. Well, if you're on staff and you have a budget for your ministry, this will be something that's under $500 a year, so really affordable for your church to be able to have access to all of this content and new stuff that gets added month after month after month.
There you go. Couple of options that you can help just move the gospel out further, and help people just get trained up as greater disciples and leaders. So the key thing to remember is go to malphursgroup.com/189, because everything you need to know is right there. There's several ways that you can engage and get more information. So that's all we're asking you to do, is go over there today and have a look, pray about that. What's your place in this? I mean, we're trusting the Lord to make this happen in a big way. I mean, he's lined up everything else for us. He's increasing our team with some really strategic people. He's increasing the resources that we have as far as the physical ways in which to help churches. He's given us the strong desire for it. And he's already provided a lot of the funding that we need, but we're just not there. We're not where we want to be and need to be to continue the expansion and the upward trend that the Lord has set us on. And that's where you come in. And we believe that a lot of you have the same heart to see this happen as we do. And so, we're just asking you to jump in there with us wherever that might be. So, hey, thanks for sticking it out. Thanks for being a listener all for as long as we've been going on with this. I mean, this is episode 189. So that's 189 weeks that we've been doing the Church Revitalization Podcast. And we love knowing that you're out there and getting the feedback from you. So keep it up. It's a big thank you to you. You're making this happen. And we're just looking forward to celebrating with you in the near future and throughout our time together as we go forward. The increase, the abundance, and the blessings that'll continue to come out of this around the world. So, hey, thanks again, and we'll see you next week.